Right now, we are experiencing a wave of remakes and reboots. The One Piece, Ranma 1/2, Rurouni Kenshin, The Ghost in the Shell, and that's just anime. In video games, we have Persona, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, God of War, and some of it's great. Some of it is a studio betting on nostalgia because betting on anything else is scary right now. Obviously, we see the same thing with other mediums like TV shows and movies. On one hand, it's great that newer generations get to be reintroduced to amazing works of art through a modern lens, and in some cases, more faithful adaptations. On the other hand, it can feel like studios are increasingly relying on established franchises because they're safer investments with some guaranteed engagement and profit instead of taking chances on original ideas. It's not a foreign concept for companies to see a series' success and be afraid to branch out into new things, or just milk the cash cow for all it's worth. I mean, just look at the Stranger Things cinematic universe. But that begs the question, this is mainly an anime channel, so we'll start with the anime stuff. The anime industry is, financially, having a bit of a rough stretch. In 2025 alone, 8 animation production studios in Japan shut down, and at least 2 of them went outright bankrupt. This could be due to poor management, small studios getting consolidated or bought out, and a lot of it can probably be contributed to something called the profitless boom, where studios suffer from labor shortage, production costs, and low payouts from production committees. The anime industry is under real pressure, and when an industry is under this kind of pressure, the people funding these projects stop asking what's the best idea and start asking what's the least likely idea to lose us money. An original show has to build its entire audience from zero. A One Piece remake walks in with one already built. Japan's Anime Data Insights Lab put out its 2026 predictions, saying the trend of relying on established franchises over new IP is set to accelerate even further this year. To be fair, it's not 100% doom and gloom. Companies like Kadokawa are explicitly saying they want to do both, mining older IP through anniversary strategies for reboots, while also funding original projects on the side. So the intent to keep originals alive is somewhat still there. Whether that intent survives contact with a shrinking balance sheet is a completely different question, because we can see a similar case with any of this is sounding familiar, it's because Hollywood is currently running this exact same experiment, and we've all been watching the results in real time. Between 1995 and 2025, movies based on entirely original screenplays accounted for only 46.8% of North American box office ticket sales, less than half, for 3 decades. The other 53 or so percent was sequels, adaptations, and franchise entries riding on an audience that already existed instead of one that had to be earned. And we don't have to squint to see where that road leads, because Hollywood's currently living through the bottom of the barrel issue that this strategy eventually hits. Now, I actually went and saw Disney's live-action Moana remake, which came out last month. Not by choice, I was babysitting some kids. And it is, by every measurable standard, a disaster. A 39% score on Rotten Tomatoes, a global opening weekend of just $95 million against a $250 million production budget, and critics openly asking, in print, why Disney remade a movie that wasn't even 10 years old yet. This is coming right on the heels of 2025 Snow White, which opened to a similarly rough $42 million. 2 quote-unquote safe bets back-to-back, both losing real money, which is baffling because there's a pattern that industry analysts are pointing out. Disney's actual hits for remakes, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Lilo and Stitch, all had a 20 to 30 year age gap between the animated original and the live-action version. Moana's original came out in 2016. 10 years is not enough distance for Remember This to actually work as a pitch. In other words, even inside just remake something safe, there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. And getting greedy with the timeline is how the safe bet stops being safe at all. So, anime isn't at Hollywood's endpoint yet, but it's worth pointing directly at Hollywood's example, because lean on nostalgia forever isn't a hypothetical bad outcome. It's an observable, already happened one, with box office receipts to prove it. This pattern isn't unique to just film. Whip out your controllers, overly priced consoles, and no longer physical games, because we see the same thing in Video games have been running their own version of this for years, and it's worth a detour because the results are a little different than we see with anime and Hollywood. Persona 3 Reload came out in 2024, and it's held up as the ideal of remake done right. Modernized, faithful, and some critics straight up calling it one of the best games of the decade. Resident Evil's remake run, RE2 in 2019, RE4 in 2023, is basically the industry's gold standard at this point. Other publishers are explicitly chasing the same formula. Which brings us to Silent Hill 2's 2024 remake, handled by Bloober Team. And this is the most interesting case for one reason. Critics loved it. Actual reviews called it proof the doubters were wrong, but it still had a rocky commercial launch. Concurrent player counts on Steam landed way below Resident Evil 4's, sparking a real "did this flop" debate among fans. So, good remake, but shaky sales. This is something important to point out, because it means critical success doesn't directly correlate to commercial success. You can nail the safe bet creatively and still watch it underperform. The same lesson Moana just taught Hollywood. A series I'm personally invested in, Steins Gate, is getting a full remake of the original 2009 visual novel. Redrawn art, re-recorded voices, new content, all releasing on August 20th, 2026. By the time you're watching this, that's either just happened or about to. So we'll see if the remake/reboot method holds up. Now, in cases like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and God of War, we're getting remakes that allow us to re-experience the art form through a modern lens. At the same time, these series are also producing sequels to the storyline. Obviously, continuing a series is not the same as remaking one. So before we go further, let's make a distinction between Even though both sequels and reboots get lumped into "why can't anyone make anything new anymore?", they're not the same thing. Grand Blue is the most recent example I can think of at the moment. Season 1 aired in 2018. Then, nothing. For 7 years. Until Season 2 finally landed in July 2025. Season 3 premiered just this past July, barely a year later. Nobody redid Season 1. Nobody reanimated the first 12 episodes with a shinier coat of paint. The story just picked back up years later, exactly where it left off. That's a completely different creative and financial bet than a remake. You're just finally paying off something they were promised a long time ago and trusting there's still enough of a fan base left around. Another anime, Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, sits in a weirder middle ground, and we're going to come back to the full story of why in a minute. New Panty and Stocking picks up right after the original's ending instead of remaking the first season, so by definition, it's a continuation, not a reboot. The only reason it took 15 years to get there wasn't exactly creative hesitation, it was a completely different obstacle. Here's the thing. The remakes are just smart business argument conveniently ignores the safe doesn't mean good argument. And alongside Hollywood, anime's already got its own receipts on this. Sailor Moon Crystal is one of the classic cases. It was a genuinely faithful adaptation, in a lot of ways, closer to the manga than the beloved 90s anime, and fans still turn their backs on it, because faithful and alive aren't the same thing. The word that kept getting used to describe the reboot was soulless. All the necessary plot points were there, but the heart that made people love the original wasn't. More recently, and more relevant to this current reboot wave we're in, there's Trigun Stampede. Now, I have yet to watch Trigun and Trigun Stampede, so I'm quoting CBR here. The original late 90s Trigun had this scrappy, off-kilter, slightly rough energy that matched Vash's whole chaotic vibe. Stampede swapped that for hyper-polished 3D animation, and the criticism it got wasn't the animation looks bad, it was that the polish made it feel sterile. From what I can gather here, it seems like something about the show's ability to express itself got flattened in the upgrade. Different decade, different studio, but the same case and the same lesson. Technical competence was never the actual hard part. Whatever made the original feel alive is the part that's genuinely difficult to manufacture twice, and just making it more polished can actively work against you. This is part of the reason why there are some remakes and sequels that can't happen. Not every beloved series even gets the "will they remake it" conversation, and the reasons vary into a wide array of categories that people tend to lump together when they shouldn't be. The reason behind why a series may not be getting any new updates can mean something completely different depending on which one you're looking at. Category 1. separating the art from the author. Rurouni Kenshin already got its acclaimed Faithful remake, but any future continuation carries a complication that has nothing to do with the show's content itself. Creator Nobuhiro Watsuki was found guilty in 2017 of possessing child pornography. Now, the show isn't the problem. It's a situation where continuing to expand the franchise means continuing to put money in a convicted man's pocket, and that's a fundamentally different issue than the performance of the content itself. Category 2. Saturation of a genre. High School DxD hasn't gotten a new season in years, and it's tempting to assume that's due to the content being too much nowadays, but it's really more of a market problem. Ecchi as a genre is genuinely struggling to find funding and an audience compared to a decade ago. It's not like it's banned, it's just much harder to sell than it used to be. Although, not to ignore the quote-unquote problematic nature of DxD, it's just unlikely for shows like that to continue past the first season, especially in today's sensitive PC climate. Just look at shows like Interspecies Reviewers. From what I remember, even though it was apparently extremely popular, though whether that's due to infamy or not, I don't know, it had so much ecchi and literal sex scenes that the anime distributors would just cancel broadcasts or drop the show entirely. I was amazed we could get something worse than High School DxD airing on television. Category 3. Legal Limbo. This one's my least favorite because it's less about quality and more about paperwork. Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt was produced by Gainax in 2010. Shortly after, director Hiroyuki Imaishi and most of the core creative team left Gainax to found Studio Trigger, but Gainax still owned the rights to the story, meaning the people who actually wanted to keep making it were legally barred from touching it. It took until 2022 for Trigger to even announce they'd gained the rights, and until 2023 for that to be fully secured. The sequel finally premiered in 2025, 15 years after the original. Nobody involved stopped wanting to make it, the IP itself was just legally stuck. Right there, I named just 3 different reasons for why a series may not be getting any updates. It could be about a person, the market, or who technically owns a piece of paper. There's probably more reasons, but it's worth keeping at least these 3 in mind, because they'd need entirely different things to be changed before any of them could be resolved. So with all that said, the financial panic, the Hollywood cautionary tale, the times it goes wrong, and the times it can't even happen at all. It'd be easy to walk away thinking remakes are basically a symptom of an industry in trouble, but that's not actually true, and it's worth noting some of the best work happening right now. There are actually plenty of cases where remakes and reboots are done right. I haven't actually watched Ranma 1/2, so I'll quote Screen Rant. Ranma 1/2 got remade by MAPPA in 2024, and what critics kept pointing at isn't just the animation upgrade, it's that the remake is actually more faithful to Rumiko Takahashi's original manga than the 90s anime ever was by cutting out the filler that used to pad the old version. It's sitting at a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was in Netflix's global top 10 in non-English content across both of its seasons. Rurouni Kenshin's 2023 remake tells the same story, a cleaner adaptation with less padding, getting more of what was actually in the source material onto the screen than the original series managed. But I want to get personal for a second, because the 2 examples that actually mean something to me are One Piece and Ghost in the Shell, and they hit me from completely opposite directions. I am a huge One Piece fan, and the Wit Studio Netflix remake dropping February 2027 has Oda Sensei himself granting full creative freedom to reimagine the story, not just reanimate the same panels with better lighting. But there's also the Netflix live action series sitting right next to it, and it's doing something the anime remake isn't really built to do: be a gateway for people who will never sit down for 1,100 plus episodes, and maybe people who don't even watch anime. And when Netflix announced the renewal for the live-action Season 2 only 2 weeks after the first season premiered, Oda posted a message saying, "To everyone who's been a fan of One Piece for years, and to those who experienced One Piece for the first time, thank you so much." And look, I know what some of you are already thinking. You're not a real One Piece fan unless you watched all 1,174 episodes, filler included, every movie, every spin-off, no shortcuts, and I sympathize. Trust me, I'm one of you. I believe there's something special about experiencing the full journey with these goofballs. The ups, the downs, the slander, the filler, the peaks. But gatekeeping this amazing story isn't the move. Whether you've only watched the live action, use One Piece, or are a true fan of the series, we should all be able to enjoy this work of art to our capacity. Unless someone's LARPing. If they're LARPing, then burn them at the stake. Then there's the Ghost in the Shell. And this one's the opposite case entirely, because I'm not the veteran here, I'm the new guy. I'm currently watching the new Science Saru adaptation. I have not watched any of the older material aside from the live-action Scarlett Johansson movie, which I think everyone agrees was ass. So this reboot may or may not be a disgrace to people who grew up on Mamoru Oshii's original film. I genuinely don't know. What I can tell you is it feels a lot goofier than the vibe the older series always gave off as someone on the outside. And it turns out that's not just me imagining it. The new 2026 version is actually closer to the original manga than Oshii's stoic philosophical film ever was. The manga's Kusanagi was always more emotional, more human, goofier, and this new show is leaning hard into that side of her on purpose. However, this switch is causing a real argument going on right now among longtime fans about whether this is a betrayal of what made the franchise iconic, or if this is the first time it's actually gotten close to the source material. I'm not qualified to referee that fight. I just know that, as someone with zero baggage going in, it worked on me completely, which might be exactly the reaction a faithful reboot is supposed to produce in newcomers, even if it is alienating the people who came in expecting what they already know. Considering all this, it seems like the case for remakes and reboots is bigger than sometimes the reviews are good. One Piece is proving you can serve the hardcore fan and keep the door open for a stranger at the same time. The Ghost in the Shell is proving that faithful doesn't always mean faithful to the version you personally fell in love with. Sometimes it means faithful to a version you never got to see, and that can create a new generation of fans even while it unsettles the old one. Remakes and originals coexisting is fine. Arguably good even. Some of these remakes are doing a better job telling these stories than the originals managed the first time around. And some of them are handing brand new people a look into something they never would have otherwise indulged in. The problem was never remakes themselves existing. The problem is if Safer Bet turns into the only bet anyone's willing to make, when remakes become the default instead of one of the option amongst several others. And right now, based on everything actually being reported by the industry itself, we're leaning more into Safer Bet every year. Now, that doesn't mean anime is doomed. It means that the original shows that do get made need to actually be watched and talked about, because if that support doesn't show up, coexist quietly turns into replace, without anyone ever actually deciding that on purpose. Nobody has to announce the death of original stories for this to happen. Original stories just have to keep losing the numbers game, year after year, until there's nothing left to greenlight. That's where things stand with anime's current remake era, as well as games and Hollywood and whatnot. There is great work happening in the same breath as real financial panic, but led by an all-or-nothing Hollywood example and a game industry running the exact same experiment with slightly better results, the anime industry is starting to bet harder and harder on its own past with every year that goes by. Let me know where you land on this. Is this a golden age of finally getting old classics done right? Or are we one bad year away from watching original anime quietly stop getting made at all? Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Watch my other videos.